everybody, welcome to this video about how to multiply and divide integers. So I really believe that everything in life, including math, is a lot easier when we love ourselves. And one of the ways that I choose to love myself is by being gentle with myself regardless of where I'm at. Sometimes life just throws you things that are kind of difficult to deal with. And when you choose to be gentle with yourself in that process, it can make the entire process a lot easier, even if you're facing some pretty big challenges. So take 2 deep breaths, give yourself a little bit of love, and then let's make this math easy.
All right, so before we start multiplying and dividing integers, I want to quickly review what an integer is. So an integer is any one of the whole numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., all the way to positive infinity, or it can also be the negative or the opposite of those whole numbers. So whole numbers are only positive, but if you also include their opposites, then that makes the set of integers. So when you're multiplying integers, you may be multiplying 2 positive integers or 2 negatives, or you may have a negative times a positive. And we're going to go through how to do each one of those situations. And the analogy that I really like to use is positrons and electrons, because electrons are subatomic particles that have a negative charge, and positrons have a positive charge. And when these two particles combine, they actually vanish because they neutralize each other. And at any point, if they separate, then they'll reappear and you'll have negatives, or like your negative electron and your positive positron. And obviously on a chemistry level, there's a lot more things going on, like you've got neutrons and protons and things like that. But if we just simplify it down to positrons and electrons, it can really help you understand the math of how to multiply positive and negative numbers. So when you have a whole bunch of positrons and electrons paired off together, the overall charge of the situation is 0 because all of them are neutralized by the other ones. And so if I do 3 times 2, I'm going to be changing this situation so that it has either a positive or negative charge. And the way that I do that depends on what the numbers are that I'm multiplying. So I'm going to have the second number represent my groups. So because it's a positive 2, that means that I'm going to have 2 groups, and these groups are being added to this situation because they're positive, so they're being added. And each one of these groups is going to have 3 positrons in it. And so when I add these 2 groups of 3 positrons, I'm going to get a positive 6 charge, which, as you know from like 3rd grade or whenever you learned multiplication, 3 times 2 does equal positive 6. But this can be really helpful when you have a problem like -4 plus or -4 times 2, because it still means the same thing where you're adding in 2 groups, but this time instead of adding in 2 groups with positive numbers in them, you're adding in 2 groups with 4 electrons in each group. And that makes your overall charge a -8 because you added in 2 groups of -4. So what happens if you have a positive number times a negative number? Well, in this case, your groups are negatives, which means that I'm going to be taking out 5 groups, and each group is going to have a positive. Now, in order to take things out, I'm going to be upsetting the balance of this all of these positive and negative pairs. Because in order to take out a positive, I'm going to have to take this positive away from its negative that it's matched with. And this positive, if I take that away and put that in one of my groups that I'm taking out, this negative is going to also not have a pair. And this is going to be the case for 5 of the negatives because I'm taking away the positives that were paired with them. So when I take those out, and I'll just scribble them out in black so you can see that those are taken out. When I take those out and these groups are taken out of the situation, I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives that no longer have a positive partner. And so 1 times -5 ends up equaling -5. Because the -5 in the problem represented taking out groups, and the 1 was what it was that was in each group that I was taking out. And so this would be the same case if I had -7 times a -1, because the -1 would tell me that I'm going to take out one group, and in this group I'm going to have 7 negatives, which means that I'm going to have to take that one, that one, that one, and basically I'm going to take out 7 of these, which means that I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoops, I think I did too many. I'll erase that. That part shouldn't have been taken out. But basically, I have 7 negatives that were taken out. And so in my situation, I now have 7 positives that are left over. So my answer is a +7. So when you're multiplying integers, the basic rule to follow is that if you have 2 numbers that have the same sign, so like a positive times a positive, your answer is going to be positive. But if you have 2 negatives multiplied together, that's also going to equal a positive. Because if you take out groups of negatives, the amount that's left inside of the situation is a positive number. And then the other 2 situations, like if you have -4 times 2, that means you're adding in negatives, which gives you a negative answer. Or in this case, if you take out positives, your answer is going to be negative because there's negatives left over. And so the general rule for how to multiply integers is that if they have the same signs, you're going to have a positive answer. If you have different signs, there's going to be a negative answer. And then you multiply the number parts of the equation to figure out what the actual number is. So like 3 times 2 is 6, or 4 times 2 is 8, 1 times 5 is 5, or 7 times 1 is 7. You get the number parts by just multiplying the numbers together. And then the positive or negative part comes from whether or not you have the same signs or opposite signs. When you're dividing integers, it's a very similar process. It's just that you're going to be dividing instead of multiplying, but the patterns will still be the same for the positive and negative parts. Because if I have 9 divided by 3, that means that I have 9 positives, but I'm going to split them into 3 groups, and I'm only going to put one of the groups in. So if I have 9 positives and I divide it into 3, that means that my result is that I have one group of 3 positives, and when those go into the situation, the overall answer is a +3. Versus in this case, if I did a -10 divided by 2, that means that I'm going to split it into 2 groups, and one of those groups is going to go into the situation. So one of those groups has 5 in it because the -10 got divided into 2 groups. And when I put that into the situation, that makes the overall charge of the positrons and electrons a -5. If you have 6 divided by -3, that means that you're going to have 6 positives. So like these 6 positives. And then you're going to divide them into 3 groups, but you're only going to take out one of the groups. So if you split those into 3 groups, that's going to equal 2. And those 2 are going to leave or be taken out because it's a -3 groups that you're dividing it into. So you take out one of those groups and you end up with a -2. Same thing with a negative divided by a negative. If you have 12 negatives, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. If you have 12 groups or 12 negatives and you split those into 3 groups, there's going to be 4 in every group, but you're only going to take out one of the groups because it's division. So you're going to do -12 divided by -3, which means I'm going to take out that group of 4 because 12 divided by 3 is 4. And when I take out those negatives, then I end up with a positive 4 because these positives don't have partners anymore. And so when you divide integers, the pattern is exactly the same for multiplying integers. If you have the same signs, like a positive divided by a positive, it'd be a positive, or a negative divided by a negative is a positive. But if you have different signs, then you'll get a negative answer. And then again, you just divide the numbers like normal, like 9 divided by 3 gives you 3, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the number part just works like normal division, but the positive or negative sign part of it depends on whether or not the dividend and the divisor are matching signs or if they're different signs. So here's a summary of how to multiply and divide integers. Basically, you multiply or divide the absolute values of the numbers, so just the number parts, not worrying about the positives or negatives. You multiply or divide those, and then you determine the sign of the answer, whether it's a product or a quotient. Products are the answers to multiplication. Quotients are answers to division. And the way you determine that is if the signs are the same or if they're different. And that's how you multiply and divide integers.
I hope this was helpful. Let me know how easy this was for you in the comments below, and then subscribe for more easy math videos. You may also want to check out my negative numbers playlist, or if you'd like more help with your math homework, you can go to mathtutoringonline.com to ask a question or book a one-on-one tutoring session. See you soon!